Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. It is Jeremy Werner and Joey Wagner with you. We got a lot of football to talk about. We got a bevy of information, some questions answered as Brett Bielema met with us media on Thursday, along with his new defensive coordinator, Bobby Hauck, and his new tight ends coach, Jared Elliott. We got to learn a lot of new information. One big position change that I feel like trumped the entire press conference for most of the fans. We'll dive into that with Kaden Feagin moving from running back to tight end. We'll talk about this defense, what we thought about Bobby Hauck, the rest of the coaching staff that's got to get filled out. Joey Wagner, good Friday morning. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's been a busy week. Nice to have this is like a small basketball break compared to what it had been for a while. So it's good to catch up on football and women's basketball. And, oh, hey, by the way, big game on Sunday for the men's team against Indiana.
Speaking of, before we dive into the football topics, Joey, we haven't let you talk basketball a while in this podcast.
That's right. Call Kyle. Call Kyle. Call the Tulip. Call Trotter.
I was going to say, we got three pretty good ones there. But some basketball news this morning is national reporter Pete Thamel of ESPN hit up Brad Underwood. Did you text him this morning, Brad, asking for an update? We do that every morning, don't we?
Yeah, I always try to say, hey, good luck. How are you from the injury front? And he says, lose this number. No, I do not text Brad Underwood in the mornings.
I didn't know if he gave you food advice, anything like that.
I don't think I could, from a self-esteem standpoint, handle the daily Brad Underwood food advices coming my way. So, no, we do not.
The emoji of a treadmill every day. Just sends you that emoji.
Yeah. And then again, lose this number.
That's right. Well, he told Pete Thamel of ESPN that Kylan Boswell is a game time decision on Sunday against Indiana, noon tip-off. They're returning from the fractured hand, unrestricted in practice. We will catch up with Brad Underwood on Saturday. Us local media scum get to meet with him at that point, Joey. We'll get some more details, hopefully, and some details on Andre Stojakovic after his ankle sprain against Michigan State, which held them out in the Wisconsin loss as well, and obviously made a huge impact. So, Illinois, can they bounce back? And do you expect Kylan Boswell to go in this one?
I mean, I think if Kylan Boswell or Andre Stojakovic play, then, yeah, I think they can bounce back. If they don't, we'll get into maybe what the likelihood or how we are gauging that likelihood is. Lamar Wilkerson's a tough cover. Tucker DeVries is a tough cover. Nick Dorn can shoot the heck out of it. He's a tough cover. There are a lot of matchups in there if you are without one of those two perimeter defenders. Now, pretty much every team has matchup. Yeah.
I want to say, Joey is an expert on Indiana basketball because there's a lot of Indiana basketball watching in his household.
There is quite a bit of Indiana basketball watching in the household. So I have seen a lot of Indiana basketball to this point. But here's the thing, without both of those two, there's not a lot of matchups in the Big Ten that you're going to look and be like, yeah, that's okay. There are just those are two of your best perimeter defenders. It's very hard to win a game without either one of those two. Now, I would think one, at least, of those two will play against Indiana. Let's just break it down real quick as to why Andre Stojakovic was listed as questionable from an ankle injury he had at Michigan State, in which he played the remainder of the game. He talked to us local media the next day, and then something happened, obviously, between that moment in time and the game against Wisconsin to hold him out, but he went through warmups. And as you mentioned, I was up in the 200s. You were down there. Didn't look particularly comfortable in doing so, but that was on Tuesday. Now you're talking a Sunday game. I think if you just think about how this stuff usually works, you would feel okay about him playing. Again, we haven't talked to Brad Underwood yet. We will talk to him and see what that looks like and where that goes, but I don't think that's an unreasonable conclusion to come to. And then with Kylan Boswell, the target was always mid-February. Brad Underwood found the first camera he could find and said, yeah, mid-February is when they expect
February 15th. And that's pretty markedly in the middle of mid-February.
That is very much in the middle of mid-February. Then let's just even peel back a few more layers. We've seen him without a splint on his hand now for about 10 days, give or take. We saw him warming up, going through something, and his right hand was of use to him warming up before the Wisconsin game. Again, another good sign. Brad Underwood told me earlier this week he was expected back in practice. He told Pete that as well. Another good sign. So you look at this, it's like, yeah, fits the timeline. It kind of fits what we've seen with the eye test, does that mean Kylan Boswell, if he plays, is playing 35 minutes in a starter role? No, I would think that's probably not the case. But if he's available, you just to get him out there to try to guard Lamar Wilkerson, to try to guard Tucker DeVries, who Kylan's guarded bigger than him before, and Tucker DeVries would fit that category. So again, the hard part for us here, Jeremy, right, is we don't want to give people false hope. Like, hey, these two definitely playing, because that's not what we're saying. And we'll talk to Brad Underwood. But if you look at the pieces that you've just kind of observed over the last week or so, I mean, you can come to a conclusion that, yeah, I don't know if it's likely, but it's definitely, probable. Is that a fair way to look at this?
Yeah, I would expect at least one of them to play, right? And I do think the timeline, just the common sense of these injuries, everything you just said lines up for at least one of these guys to play, potentially both to play. And I would say Andre Stojakovic playing in this game might be as important or more important than Kylan Boswell, because I've always thought Kylan Boswell, let's ramp him up, right? Play 10, 15 minutes first game if you can, come off the bench, give a little bit of a spark to that defense, give you somebody who can just get into people. He's going to have a ton of energy. His conditioning maybe isn't fully game there, but he's been able to run, obviously, the last several weeks with just the hand injury. So all those things, like I always thought that was the case. Then you get him to LA, especially against that UCLA team over the weekend, next weekend. That's a game you definitely want him ramped up, ready to go against Donovan Dent. That's a very difficult game. But of course, this all leads to Michigan. You'd love to have him, Michigan, be able to play 30 minutes of Kylan Boswell basketball. But we got to see how that hand is. I don't expect him to shoot as many as he normally does, or to handle as much as he normally does. But going through the workout seemed like he was handling pretty well with that right hand. So I would imagine if there's no setbacks, this guy's going to play on Sunday. So we'll find that out then. But getting Andre Stojakovic back would be huge. Whether he's guarding Lamar Wilkerson, which if Boswell can't go, I would imagine he gets the primary assignment, because I wouldn't expect Boswell to start right away. So getting Stojakovic back would be huge there. And then just another guy who could potentially go against DeVries as well. So plus, offensively, Stojakovic, I know the ankle might not be 100%, Joey, but he can shoot. He can drive. He can handle the ball. Like, those are questions we all have with Kylan Boswell when he comes back from that hand injury. So yeah, I think if one of those guys is available, I feel good about them bouncing back, because I love the advantage in the front court. Indiana's front court is not very good. I don't think Merck and Z are going to play as poorly as they did against Wisconsin. At least one of those guys, I would imagine, bounce back. But Lamar Wilkerson is playing as well as anybody in the Big Ten right now. Like, he is working his way into my all Big Ten first team. I think I'd have him there based on his last month here. Indiana's won 5 of 6 games. That includes home wins over Purdue and Wisconsin. They went to UCLA and won that game. That's not easy. So yeah, I think you need one of these guys. And let's be honest, Joey, even if they're not 100%, there's some urgency here with Illinois. You don't want to sacrifice the long term of this game, but you don't want 3 losses in a row. Especially back-to-back losses at home to teams that aren't as good as you in the Big Ten. I'm not that concerned about this team, because they've lost 2 overtime games to teams I really like. I think Wisconsin's pretty good. Michigan State obviously is very good. And, they lost a game on a buzzer beater to Nebraska. So I'm not overly concerned about this team, but you want to get rid of the bad vibes of back-to-back losses, no matter what those losses were.
Yeah, the other thing is, does it not seem like Brad Underwood, to bring Kylan Boswell back into the rotation, would want to do that at home? Like, if that feels like, I don't know if you've seen, Jeremy, but the internets, the Twitters this week have had some discussion about the State Farm Center environment. And I would think Kylan Boswell potentially checking in would maybe get some of the noise that the internet longs for.
Here's my thing. Kyle and I talked about the other day, and I haven't waved into this too much outside of that, but I think Robert Rosenthal from Illini Board hit it best. All you got to do is be loud. All you got to do is just go, oh, like that. That's all we did when I was a student in the Orange Crush, when I was a freshman, and D. Brown and James Augustine were there. That's all it is. Just constantly be loud when the other team has the ball. Like, that's all it is. Like, I think there's part of the State Farm Center and all the premium seating now that's taken away a little bit of the environment, because you got to make all that money, but you just constantly be loud. That's all it is. So if Orange Crush takes that away, I think that's the biggest thing. But Illinois' got to get that home court event. This is a tough game on Sunday, because even if these guys play, Joey, they're coming back from injury, right? And might not be 100%.
That's right. I just wanted to bring it. Does feel like that would be a home moment for Brad to try to get Kylan back out there if Kylan's cleared and able to do so. But yeah, Wilkerson's a bucket. He is as good of a pure scorer as you are going to see in the Big Ten. He get it he can score from anywhere, all three levels. He's crafty. He's a really, really good player. You would love to have one of Boswell or Stojakovic available to cover him. But to your point, I thought this was a good point. You don't want to sacrifice, the long term of what this team can do, both to close the regular season and into the postseason. But we should acknowledge the loss to Wisconsin was a hiccup, and this is still a Big Ten championship race. Like, they are still in there. They lose to Wisconsin. Northwestern gives Michigan everything at once the next night. I mean, this is still it's an uphill battle at this point, right? But this is still a race. And then again, maybe the 1 seed is harder to envision at this point, but you still want to get a 2 seed. If you can find your way into a 2 seed, that's pretty good. So
I'd rather play a 7 than a 6 in the first weekend, right? I'd rather play a 7 than a 6.
And you don't want to go to objectively. I mean, I don't think the West Coast trips are like, I mean, they're not easy. They're not impossible, but you're going out there. You'd like to be as healthy as you can. You'd like to not go out there riding a 3-game losing streak and trying to figure things out. So, yeah, this is a huge opportunity for Illinois just to get back on track a little bit. That even saying on track after the last 2 games feels a little bit weird because the context of losing in overtime at Michigan State, the context of losing to Wisconsin without your 2 best perimeter defenders. But yeah, you don't want to head west on a 3-game losing streak, and then all of a sudden now the seed line conversation becomes maybe a little bit more significant. And then if you're Indiana, you're coming in here. This is a hell of a chance for Indiana on a resume that's been, as you mentioned, completely rebuilt and molded over the last 3 weeks. This is a huge opportunity for Indiana to come into Champaign and really, really say, hey, we've got this thing figured out here.
Yeah. Lamar Wilkerson, 24.4 points a game during Big Ten play on 48% shooting. He's averaging 3.6 threes made per game right now. So this guy is as good as any scorer in college basketball right now. Guys, when it comes to my diet, every meal revolves around the protein that I make. And that's why it's really important to get the best, most tender meat. And whether you like steak and eggs for breakfast, you love smash burgers, or making that slow cooked pot roast that falls apart when you touch it with just a dull spoon, or making that great Sunday steak, that's where Omaha Steaks come in. This is the most tender meat I have ever had. They delivered a box to our door. We tried their hot dogs, which were great, all beef franks, which are my favorite, chicken, most tender chicken I've had as well. And right now, Omaha Steaks is celebrating President's Day with the exceptional handcrafted flavor and convenience of Omaha Steaks. They have a great lineup of exclusive USDA certified tender steaks, gourmet burgers, versatile chicken, pork, seafood, and more. Omaha Steaks is the choice of steakhouses and professional chefs around the world. This is grass-fed, grain-finished beef that has more marbling for that excellent flavor. So get 50% off the world's best everyday protein. Go to omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their President's Day sale. And for an extra $35 off, use promo code Illini at checkout. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $35 off with promo code Illini at checkout. All right, Joe, let's switch to football. We had an hour of media availability on Thursday. Got to talk with Brett Bielema for about, 25 minutes. Got to talk with Bobby Hauck for about 15, and got to talk with Jared Elliott for about 10 minutes here. Let's start on the Bobby Hauck hire, our first interactions with him face-to-face, get to ask some questions, get some questions we had answered, and some things that I think needed to be cleared up. But I'll just pose this question to you. Because when this happened, I think there's just, we had the podcast. We were still learning about Bobby Hauck, trying to figure out how this all worked, because it wasn't a name that was really on our radar. Brett Bielema surprised almost everybody for this. So since then, since meeting with him, digesting this over the last week or so, do you feel better, the same, or worse about the Bobby Hauck hire after his press conference?
Maybe about the same. I think I feel about the same with it. I do have questions about especially stopping the run with the way 3-3-5s and the way it sounds like, quickness is prioritized. Like, I do have questions when you get into the Big Ten about stopping the run effectively enough to let some of that pressure, that, varied pressure, be meaningful to you. So that is a concern to me. But I did like that Bobby Hauck said, hey, doesn't 3-3-5 doesn't mean we're going to be in that every single possession. It does seem like our vision for this is to kind of mold and shape it to what they have to be, but still keeping that aggressive mindset. That was my takeaway. I do think 3-3-5 is what you are going to see a lot of, but I mean, he's been around. You know that you've got to kind of adapt and adjust from game to game and go from there. But I do the thing that I left there liking as much as I liked it when we potted after the game. This is, I think, going to unlock or to enhance your best players in the secondary. This defense for Matthew Bailey feels, what Brett say, serve it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
With that, like, that feels right. Like, this feels like a defense that Matthew Bailey can really, really shine in. This feels like a defense Xavier Scott can really, really shine in. Grant Bierman was a name we mentioned on the pod, so I don't want to rehash our last pod, but I like the idea of him coming off the ball or being kind of one of those linebackers who gets pressure like that from different spots. So I feel about the same, I guess, and maybe that's not the fun answer. I didn't leave that pressure thinking like it's going to reinvent the wheel in the Big Ten. And that's not because of anything they said or didn't say. I just think that the 3-3-5, it's one, it is going to be hard to prepare for, but it also leaves you susceptible to some things, especially in this conference.
Let's be honest. Like as media guys, we read up on Bobby Hauck, and relationship with the media was not always the best, especially his first tenure there. Is some questions around the program, but listen, I didn't think he'd bomb. I think I always knew that in a Brett Bielema program, PR is really important. These press conferences, Brett Bielema takes really the marketing. I mean, Brett Bielema sit down interview. He's got a future in the media. He could have had a future in the media if he didn't want to be a head coach making all this money. He could have been doing it in the media as well. So he did a nice job with his interview with Bobby, but that's a PR strategy, right? Like sit down with Bobby, open up, talk. Like these things are important. Brett knows how important it is to market your program, especially at a place like Illinois. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I add to that real quick? Because that was something you and I had talked about. One, that video, I do want to talk about that video really quickly before we met with Bobby Hauck. That was meant to, in my view, tell Bobby Hauck, who is this guy? Let people know who Bobby Hauck is, basically show rather than say why Brett is very excited about this hire. And two, and I think the big thing that I took from it was this was a rebranding of the defense and the way that the Illinois defense is thought about. And that they basically if you've thought of Illinois correctly, over the last few years as a passive defense, a bend but don't break, a keep it in front of you. That's exactly what it was. This was a rebrand opportunity for Brett Bielema and Bobby Hauck to sit down on camera and say, reshape how you think about what this defense is, and this is what it's going to be. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought that was a twofold intent for that video they put out.
No, it's a great point. I'll build on it here. Listen, I didn't think Bobby was going to blow anybody away with personality. He's a ball coach. He's an old school ball coach, but the one thing I did think like that we got cleared up, and Joey, you asked about it, was he will call the defense. Like, I didn't think that was a question, but some people did because he's never been a defensive coordinator. He's never held that role before, but he said he has called the defense, and he's been a big hand in calling the defense, even when he wasn't the play caller on game day at Montana. He has no position group. He's a roving coordinator, Joey, which means he's not going to be Aaron Henry every day was with the safeties. Ryan Walters every day was coaching the safeties. Now you go big picture, like Barry Lunny has quarterbacks, but Art Sikowski's handled that more here recently, right? So Barry kind of pops around to different groups throughout practice. That's what Brett Bielema wants here. And we talked about in the last one, this was an extreme pivot philosophically, and we'll dive more in that here in a second, but it was an extreme pivot to experience. Right. This was one of the biggest things that Brett talked about last week was I wanted somebody I could just hand the defense to. Like, this is Bobby's side of the ball. Brett is learning this as Bobby teaches it to him and his players. Now, Brett obviously knows a lot about ball. He's going to this for a reason. He's going to be an expert on this quickly, but Bobby Hauck is more of an expert on this than Brett Bielema was. That was not the case with Aaron. Like, Brett was a bigger expert on that side of the ball and calling defenses because he's done it before than Aaron, who took the job. So it is clear, Joey, that he trusts Bobby to just take this defensive ship and let Brett be the CEO. The things Bobby did not want to do in college football: administration, personnel, contracts, finances, pay for play. Bobby got tired of that stuff. Brett doesn't. Like Brett, that's who he is. He handles all that stuff. It's clear he trusts Bobby to run the defense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you think, and I wish I don't know how you would have phrased this to Brett in that presser. There's a vulnerability for Brett Bielema to do this. Because, like, we've covered Brett, got to know him a little bit. He likes to have answers. He loves to know every single thing that's going on in this. And as you mentioned, Brett is a football guy. Like, I don't think this 3-3-5, he can't go up to a whiteboard and draw at least mostly conceptually what this is going to look like, right? But to not have some of the answers and to learn it on the fly for someone who likes to have all of that like him, there is a little bit of vulnerability in that. And with that, I think it's, how much input is he going to want to put in on this as he's learning it or early on, right? Like this very much is, you tell me what this is, and over time and really probably even in the learning process, I'm sure Brett is going to have thoughts and opinions. He knows the Big Ten about as well as anybody does, right? But I do think this is very much a teach me, let me digest this, and then we'll go from there. And I think that's kind of a telling move in terms of how much he's entrusting Bobby with this.
Yeah, I want to be careful with how I kind of, frame this, because again, Aaron knows ball. Aaron Henry's a very smart football mind, but Brett, there was always times I got to lead Aaron through this. I got to, kind of not hold his hand, but kind of lead him through this and help him along the way. I don't think you're going to hear that language with Bobby, right? Just because Bobby's been through it. He's 19 years as a head coach. Aaron was a first-time defensive coordinator. Oh, and in the Big Ten. So even though, like, I never agreed with people who just thought he was incompetent or really bad at his job, I just didn't think he was to the level that Brett Bielema wants to be a great program in the Big Ten. So he's trusting Bobby to do that. We'll see if he is, but I don't think you're going to hear Brett say, I got to lead Bobby through this. I just don't. I think that's what he wanted was, going from mid-30s guy to a 61-year-old former head coach.
Yeah, and I also think that's, when he promoted Aaron, it was assumed that, okay, this is it's the first time Aaron is a first-time defensive coordinator. Brett is a long-time defensive coordinator. He is going to help Aaron through this. And there'll be some transition. Brett will have to help Bobby through some transition to being in the Big Ten. I think that's assumed and implied, but I also think, Bobby's really experienced. You're not hiring him with the expectation of we're going to help him grow into this. It's, hey, come in. You've got this idea. I'm trusting you with this idea, this system, this thing that you've crafted and put your own fingerprints on from when you learned it from Rocky Long. Great. Come in and do it here, and I'll learn from you. Like that's a very different, I think, expectation hiring Bobby Hauck than it was hiring Aaron Henry, a first-time defensive coordinator which I guess Bobby is too, but Aaron was just younger. Like Bobby has so much experience in college football. I think that's the difference if I articulated that well.
Yeah, it's weird because he's never been a defensive coordinator, but he's been the play caller, apparently. So that's
in some level, I guess. That was I'm gonna level with you. I wish I had followed up.
Yeah,
I left that a little confused.
Yeah, he didn't specify like which years he was, which years he wasn't. We only had 15 minutes. There's only so many questions we can ask. We can't take everybody's time and questions away. So some follow-ups we'll get to at some point, but he did say he's called plays before at Montana. As for, let's talk about this scheme. Matt Pistol did a great job breaking it down, and I think a lot of things that he said applied to what Bobby was talking about with his scheme, but just more thoughts about shifting to this scheme. I really like, Joey, that they're going towards aggression. I've always said that on this podcast. What I loved about Ryan Walters was he was aggressive, sometimes to a fault, but also to a lot of success. It was just uncomfortable playing offense against Ryan Walters, the way he called plays and the way he was a defensive coordinator. I like that Illinois is going to try to dictate things under Bobby Hauck on the field more than react to them. I'm a sucker for that. Like I just like that style of playing defense because offenses are too good not to put pressure on them. Offenses are too good not to make them throw into tight windows. So if you're telling me more aggression, more blitzing, more deception, more man coverage, I like that because I like putting college quarterbacks in that kind of pressure and into throwing the tight windows. I like that this defense fits the personnel in the back end, like you're talking about. Xavier Scott, Matthew Bailey, but even future-wise, Jacob Eberhardt, Nick Hankins, guys like that, I'm really excited about. I do like that Illinois will be a unique prep, right? The defense kind of became stale, kind of became common that they ran under Ryan Walters, at least variations of it. It looked similar to a lot of things the Big Ten did. So for our opponents, each week you kind of roll things over, including into Illinois. That said, Joey, there's a reason Illinois is a unique prep, right? There is downside to this defense. Aggression leads to more big play opportunities if the offense can block it up or if you don't call the right play at the right moment, because you're putting a lot of one-on-one situations with your secondary, one-on-one situations in a run gap. You're going from a 2-gap scheme where the defensive linemen just try to clog things up and free things up for the back end. Now, defensive linemen have 1 gap that they're just trying to disrupt. If the linebacker or the defensive lineman's out of that gap, huge run hole. Right. And then the safety's got to clean that up in a one-on-one. Same thing with your coverage on the back end. So that can lead to some big plays. Also, the reason a lot of people don't run this scheme is you have smaller personnel usually out on the field, Joey. And it's usually a defense you try to run when you can't get the level of talent that some of your other opponents get. So if you're playing up against big offensive lines and great offensive coaches in the Big Ten, they can power you. They can find some answers to it. So there is some downside, right, to this defense that we got to find out. We'll see if the risk is worth the reward sometimes. But I will say one positive, if you want to look for it, is Tony White ran this defense in the Big Ten successfully at Nebraska. In 2 years under Tony White, who's now at Florida State, runs the same defense, 3-3-5. Nebraska finished number 13 and number 17 in the country in scoring defense. Now, they had Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmaker. Those are really good, big defensive linemen and had some good playmakers behind it. So, but if you're looking for a positive in the Big Ten, you did run it well with Tony White at Nebraska. They were different than everybody, but no one else runs this, and there's probably a reason for that. So, kind of two-sided coin there.
Yeah, and with it, I think we'll see some when the spring roster comes out. We'll probably see some position changes. Like, obviously, Kaden Feagin got the headlines, and we'll talk about that yesterday. But Brett said, hey, some former what you would think of as defensive ends might be nose tackles. Now, what you would think of as outside linebackers, Joe Barna, might be a defensive lineman now. And I thought the very, very interesting thing to me was maybe some safeties or some defensive backs might be linebackers now. And at that point, I'm like, okay. Like, we've seen them kind of flirt with that mold a little bit, right? Caden Cobbs is that mold. Malachi Hood was that mold. You look at a guy like Des Stroughton. He's massive. Is he a guy that you see more in that linebacker situation moving forward? We don't know. I mean, Brett never said that. But It's a nice guy. Yeah, like that might be because he could play whatever they call the star now. Like, I think that's where Zanai also would fit. But like, I think that'll be something we'll have to go through the spring roster and see who gets who. I don't think
I know everybody is screaming saying Matthew Bailey is going to be a linebacker. He'll play like a linebacker, but he's going to be that. They call it a rover, or, whatever they call it in this defense. He hasn't figured out, but it's that strong safety position still. But he's going to move around like at the same level as the linebacker, which he basically did anyway.
Correct. Yeah, and I wanted to pick your brain about that because Matthew Bailey exactly did what we're talking about here. But Brett said, "Hey, we ran 3-3-5 a lot since I've been here," and I was like,
"Yeah,
well,
it's different." You had 3 linebackers, but those two of the outside linebackers were basically
defensive linemen,
defensive ends, right? Like the guys who were playing defensive end were your outside linebackers. Now you're going to have actual linebackers as your outside linebackers, like Grant Bierman, who could be an edge rusher in some defenses. Like he'll probably play either weak side linebacker, which can be an overhang, but they're more hybrid kind of players. Like Gabe Akis was an outside linebacker. No, he was a defensive end. He really was. Alec Bryant was a defensive end. Now, Leon Lowry could be that stand-up. And
we saw a little bit of that.
Yes, we saw some of that. And that's one thing I asked Brett about is he's tinkered with this 3-3-5 before. We saw it in the Citrus Bowl when JoJo Hayden and Daniel Brown were those stacked 3-3-5 outside linebackers. Not the outside linebackers that are on the edges. No, that stacked outside linebackers. And they had some success against South Carolina doing it. And we saw it a lot in spring ball last year. They were toying with it. Like he was messing around with it with a lot of JoJo Hayden. That's why I thought he could have played a bigger role last year. Daniel Brown, but he got hurt a little bit. But we did see Leon Lowry in that stacked kind of 3-3-5 scheme when they ran it this year. And those are the guys that are interesting, like that. Eric Gale eventually, right, is that kind of player. Daniel Brown is going to be that kind of stacked outside linebacker that's going to shift a little bit. Joe Barna, you said, I think Mason Moragan is probably going to be a defensive end now. So the personnel will change. Jacob Alexander, Kingston Shaw are going to be defensive ends in this scheme. But a guy like Caden Bennett could be that stand-up off-ball linebacker now. So just really interesting to see how they use all these pieces.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And again, it's something we talked about on the pod after. Some of the recruiting class and really some of the transfer class makes, not that it didn't make sense when they signed or when they were added, but I would say it makes a little bit more sense now. The outside linebackers, the edge rushers that they added in the high school class, that makes a lot more sense. That is probably the one position group to me that I'm like, okay, I see this so much more for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. Hopefully that transitions into our next topic with the.
I do want to bring up the defensive line because I think we were right the last one, but just to reiterate, defensive line, I think Carter Janke, Pat Farrell, Demetrius John, Cameron Brooks, Connor Sullivan, those are your defensive ends, right? And Joe Barna. Like, I think those guys are your defensive ends. William Holmes along with that. But then does Cam Brooks go inside the nose tackle? Because he could be disruptive there. Isaiah Thomason, Daryl Prater, the transfers are likely nose tackles in this one. So it'll be fascinating to watch how that develops. Because I would imagine Janke is a defensive end more than nose tackle because you need those big bodies, kind of like Nebraska had with Ty Robinson was 6'6", 310. You need those big stout guys. But you also need disruptive pieces. So just be interesting to see how it all plays out in the spring.
Yeah, and I think Daniel Brown is a guy who's probably more of a linebacker now, as we've discussed. And just look at here. Mason Moragan is probably more of a defensive end now. And now at this point, you look back, it's like Alex Bray probably fits in this, right? Like that was part of the reason he transferred to Kansas, was just wasn't a fit for how they did. Now it actually, he would, I think, and you're smarter than me, I think he'd fit pretty well in this.
Well, Ish Conte is a really interesting piece because he was an edge / linebacker last year. Now that's exactly what they're looking for. So you talk about an athlete, like we're really excited about what Grant Bierman can be here, but Ish Conte's one too is like that weak side outside linebacker who's going to be an edge rusher a lot, a blitzer a lot, but also can drop into coverage. So those versatile pieces, Matthew Bailey, Ish Conte, Grant Bierman are really important for this defense.
Does it not feel like how do I want to put this? Like they kind of built the roster in that defensive front seven kind of over the last 2 years, living a little bit in both, right? Like some of these guys that we think are going to transition fairly well, your Ish Contes of the world, like didn't really have the clearest cut fit in that last defense. Yeah, it kind of felt like they were living a little bit in both worlds in terms of the way that they built some of those players up on the front seven and those rooms up on the front seven. Certainly not all the way, but there was a little bit of element to that versatility. Like this 3-3-5, we thought this was going to be the prominent sub package coming into this year, right? Like that was the whole thing coming into 2025. We're like, sub packages, man. They did it well at the end of 24, sub packages. And this would have been that with the players that they have on the roster, and it just didn't really manifest in that way. And now you're just really leaning into that on a more full-time basis.
We need to follow up with Brett on that because 2024 felt like most of their defensive success late in the year was these sub packages, partly out of they had to because of injuries, but then they just kind of ditched that. It felt like last year. So let's follow up with him at some point. Guys, if you're like me, you want to eat healthy, you want to take care of yourself, and you'd love to cook that meal from scratch, but you got cold days, big goals, and no time to cook. Well, that's where Factor comes in. Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs, so eat well without the planning or the cooking. What goes inside these Factor meals is quality, functional ingredients, including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. No refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, no refined seed oils. Meals that fit your goals and schedule. Healthier eating, calorie management, more protein. And the great part is there's great variety. Go to factormeals.com. You can see 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and delicious throughout the winter. Their options include my favorite high protein, their calorie smart Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and ready to eat salads. Plus, their new Muscle Pro collection supports strength and recovery. The great thing about Factor is it's always fresh, never frozen, ready in about 2 minutes, no prep, no stress. So head to factormeals.com/Illini50 off and use code Illini50 off to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. Head to factormeals.com/Illini50 off. Use code Illini50 off to get 50% off and free breakfast for 1 year. New subscribers only, varies by plan. One free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active. All right, let's talk about the rest of this because Illinois still has other coach vacancies. We did get the news officially. Brett Bielema put it out to the world, kind of said he was going to do it, but made it more official yesterday. Chris Hurd will be the special teams coordinator. He had been the special teams analyst and the special, the
senior special teams assistant.
Yeah, special teams assistant was what I was thinking. But yeah, senior special teams assistant. Chris Hurd, the last 2 years, played a big role with the specialists while Robbie Disher was coaching the tight ends. Chris was always with the specialists at that point. Had some success, right, with David Alano, Lane Hansen, the punt returners they had the last couple of years with Hank Beatty and Isaiah Williams. So not a surprise there. Brett did say he finished second to Robbie for the job 3 years ago, and he still came on the staff along with Robbie. And he did make a great point, Joey, that with all this other change happening, maybe it makes sense to have a little bit of stability somewhere and have a familiar voice in that special teams operation.
Yeah, and especially because a lot of the special teams, your non-returners, are either tight ends. We saw a ton of tight ends out on some of those coverage and return units, or defensive players. So for the guys who are still there, just to know that you've got a similar voice in your special teams, it's a small thing, Jeremy, but I do think it's meaningful to know that, okay, I still know what Chris Hurd wants to do. I still know who he is, how to deal with how to interact with him. I do think that is valuable.
Jared Elliott, first impressions. One, very large man. Like just looks like a tight end that played college football. But two, really impressive. Sounds like a former head coach. And Brett Bielema said, hey, I had a type this offseason, so worth monitoring that for the other positions. But I think that guy's going to be able to recruit. I think he's got a presence about him in front of us. I thought he was great at telling his story, saying what he wants in his group. His connection to Mike New was clear. His connection to Christian Abney, I think, will pay off from being at Ball State, where he was offensive coordinator for a year under Mike, who called the plays. But I'm really impressed, and I think that could help in recruiting where they need help. Like I liked Robbie a lot. I think he did a lot of good things special team wise, what he did with Tip Ryman and Tanner Arkin, but they got to add more talent at that position. And Jack Brown, 4-star out of Missouri, I think putting Jared Elliott into that recruitment can help out.
Yeah, he's a huge person. I was really impressed with Jared Elliott. Like, incredibly, he commanded the room. He was obviously, I think his journey is cool from D3 to D2 to FCS, FBS, Group of 5, Power 4. He knows the state. I think that's meaningful, even though the recruiting department handles a lot of basically recruiting at this point, right? They're the ones who are on the road quite a bit. To have a coach who knows the ins and outs of the state, where to go, kind of still who to talk to. I mean, he recruited the state when he was at Western Illinois. He knows this area. He also has that familiarity in Indianapolis, and so you get a little bit further east of Champaign that we've seen Illinois try to find a footprint into. I think that is certainly going to help. I think he's going to be impressive with Jack Brown. I was really, really encouraged by what he said. And I thought a lot of the stuff that he said was also really interesting, that tight end recruiting, you have to think outside of the box a little bit. Christian Abney was a big-bodied quarterback that he saw a tight end who could come in and be effective when they were at Ball State. And that's we've talked about it on this pod before, right? The tight ends who are big, can block, and can catch. There's like 3 of those in every single class, and they're going to the absolute who's who. So you've got to find ways to, maybe this guy's a little bit undersized, or maybe we can see this quarterback or bulking up, or this receiver bulking up, or do things that make it work, and find a way to enhance those physical profiles on the football field. So I was really thoroughly impressed with what he did. I got a text last week when he got hired, someone who had known him in the coaching tree, and said he's just a really, really good football coach, a good human being. I left that presser with him blown away a little bit by what he brought to the table. And to your point, sounded like a head coach, sounded like a guy who's been there, done that before.
All right, so there's a couple other vacancies here, right? Like, it's weird because there are 10 assistant coaches technically, but that's not like those are the only guys who can coach on the field anymore. So you're not limited just to that anymore. Like, Art Sikowski is technically not one of the 10 assistant coaches that you naturally think of, but he's on the road recruiting. He's making more money than Trent Harris did last year as the outside linebackers coach. So we got to like broaden our horizons, that they're not limited. Like, there's no like box anymore when it comes to that. But you do need a running backs coach. And you do need defensive assistants, right? You lost Trent Harris and you need a defensive line coach. So it'll be interesting how that's all split up. Brett basically said we're going to have a front coach. We're going to have somebody at the second level, and we'll have somebody in the secondary. Corey Parker is there at the corners, but I would imagine you have a safeties coach, right? And our colleague Matthew Stevens, writes for Illini Guys, reported that Ronnie Bradford will follow Bobby Hauck from Montana. I can confirm he's a very top candidate, right? And I think Matt's on the money there with him likely joining the staff. He was a special teams assistant in the NFL for the Miami Dolphins, but he was a defense coordinator and safeties coach for Hauck. So that would make a lot of sense to bring him in as a safeties coach, a guy who knows this defense incredibly well. Be interesting if they add any more Montana staffers to this defense. That would make sense, right? Somebody that's got a lot of ties to Hauck, kind of hit the ground running in the spring, knows how to teach it. That's more important to me right now than recruiting. And Joey, just big picture, with the way the rules are now, I think recruiting is not as important. It's still important. It's not as important for these assistant coaches as it was before the rules didn't allow Pat Embleton and Eddie Simpkins and Terry Hawthorne. These recruiting staffers can now hit the road recruiting as one of your 10 recruiting staffers on the road. Those guys do a lot of the grunt work, a lot of the foot soldier stuff on the recruiting trail, getting in and out of these high schools. Now, you still got great recruiters as your assistants. You still want them to be a big part of this, to be able to have that kind of personality and hit the road and see these guys, but it's not as important. So I do think for these defensive spots in a new scheme, for me, it's coaching. It's on-field coaching has got to be the precedent.
Yeah, especially right now. The other thing I thought that was really interesting, but Brett Bielema brought up, is on the defensive side of the ball in each room, however those rooms are broken up. It sounds the way he envisioned it, like 3 levels, front, middle, back, is kind of the way that it was brought up. I'm sure there'll be some breakdown in those levels, but you want someone who knows this defense, who's been in this defense, which translation, people that probably Bobby worked with at Montana. It makes sense for that. And then he wants someone who is from the older defense. So people who have been at Illinois, your Corey Parkers, your Archie McDaniels, maybe an Alex Panos, someone who has been, especially Alex Panos, now that both Terrence Jamison and Antonio James are gone from the defensive line.
And Trent Harris.
And Trent Harris. Like Alex Panos is still that holdover, a familiar voice. So I do think that was interesting. You want the old, someone from the old. I make fun of him. He would literally break my hand with the look. But
Taekwondo man.
Not make fun of him. Have fun with it. But yeah, I thought that was interesting that you want some of the old and some of the new in there to kind of blend these ideas together. So it also sounds like to me, Bobby Hauck is going to have a lot of leeway in building this defensive staff. The defensive line we need to bring up really quickly, because Brett Bielema said obviously you want someone from the 3-3-5 tree, but he said he had someone in the building who had never worked with basically Bobby Hauck or his staff before. So then you and I are starting to go through defensive line 3-3-5 coaches and seeing where that goes. So I just thought that was also something to note, that that's a position that maybe you just go get somebody who has run this maybe it's a power 4, window there, who can come in and do that. So that defensive line hire is going to be fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, some of the trees, Iowa State ran it under Matt Campbell. Florida State obviously runs it. Cincinnati has run it. Baylor has not run it very well here recently, but they run it. It was Arizona State that ran some of this as well, one of those schools. But there's not a lot of schools that do it. So somebody with, that kind of expertise is going to be really important. But you'd want somebody that has, experience doing it at this level, right? Because at Montana, they had, one guy was usually over 260 pounds. You're going to have more than that at this level, right? There's not going to be just 250-pound defensive ends only in this defense. So I think you're going to have nose tackles, obviously around 290 to 300. And I think one of your defensive ends, Pat Farrell, Carter Janke, will be a really stout guy. So I'd like to have some experience doing that. Anything else on the assistant? One more thing. Brett Bielema was on the score this morning up in Chicago, and he was joking with David Hall, who's a Ball State guy, that he figured he'd like Jared Elliott getting hired since he was at Ball State. And then Ruthie Polinsky, who's a Michigan girl, he said, we're talking to a Michigan guy for the staff. And I immediately go to running backs, Joey, and I immediately think of, didn't Tyrone Wheatley just step down at D2 Wayne State? And head coaching experience matters to Brett. There's some other names. Mike Hart is out there, former running backs coach. Ron Bellamy was on the Michigan staff. He could potentially be an assistant coach somewhere. So just my mind went straight to Tyrone Wheatley there. But interesting you put that nugget out there to Chicago viewers.
Brett Bielema very much enjoys doing that, which also I will say, and this is just reading between the lines. I don't know if this is exceptional content. I don't know if this is right or wrong. He said a running backs coach in the next 5 to 7 days. If, in fact, he was talking about a running backs coach, and if, in fact, he was so confident saying, we're talking to a Michigan guy, which I know he did because you heard it, we're talking to a Michigan guy, 5 to 7 days feels like the long end of this, right? I don't think Brett Bielema.
In 5 to 7 days sure sounds like a let's go through HR timeline, right? That feels like it's pretty much decided, I would imagine. Maybe it's not, but just feels like a certain timeline that HR would give him.
I would just be shocked if Brett Bielema, we just sat through a whole.
Tyrone Wheatley just resigned 2 days ago, so I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if we know the exact Bobby Hauck timeline. We tried, Montana reporters. We tried to get as much information about that as possible, but I don't know how detailed they were and how honest they would be with all that stuff. So,
yeah, I don't know. We tried. We did our level best to get that information out from them and figure out how that lined up. But yeah, I don't know. It just strikes me as interesting that Brett Bielema would specifically say a Michigan guy if you weren't in the red zone on that one. And I know he said the whole Super Bowl ordeal, but that was a little more broad than straight up saying a Michigan guy.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the number one topic people probably want us to talk about. We're 45 minutes in, but I just feel it's important to talk about the actual hire of the defense coordinator, which is going to have a huge impact. I mean, this is a monster hire. Like this is going to be a big part of shaping the program for at least the next 2 or 3 years. And Brett keeps talking about, and I think it's the right way of framing it. Every decision I make now has to be about the year ahead. And he talks about 2026. Every decision about 2026. That's not completely true because you got recruiting stuff and you're always trying to think ahead. But you can't plan what your roster is going to be in 2027, Joey. You can't plan what your assistant staff is going to be in 2027. Like Illinois, probably going to have an offensive coordinator change, I would imagine, after next year, because Barry Lundy better have a head coaching job, I would hope, for his sake, because he's been so good. But for Illinois' sake, you hope to keep him. But I think that is the right framing, and Brett's making this decision not for 2026 to help his defense, but surely it's going to have a huge impact on the next 5 years of his program. The first 5 years went really well because of some of his hires. Maybe could have gone better if he would have nailed the defense coordinator second hire a little bit better. But the next 5 years, Bobby Hauck's going to have a huge impact on his program.
Yes, this is the next wave, the next era of Brett Bielema's Illinois football tenure in the sense of both players on the field, right? This is the most roster turnover we've seen under Brett Bielema at Illinois. And then it's the most coaching turnover. I believe this probably surpasses when Ryan went to Purdue.
It was probably around 5, but 5 coaches, and then you think of what, a 40-person senior class. He called it a year of transition. That's really apt. This is a huge year of transition in the program.
Yeah, so now you've entrusted Bobby Hauck in being the defensive face of the next era, of the Brett Bielema era, the next window, I guess, however you want to break it down. So this is going to shape the next 3-4 years of Illinois football in terms of how it goes and what they're able to do on the field. And he did say, and I do think this is a really important part to bring up, Brett Bielema, yes, this is a year of transition. Yes, you've lost a lot of really good players. You've made a significant defensive change. He said, everything I've done since the end of last season is how do we have success in 26? And he said, obviously, I'm concerned about 27, 28, 29, but he has adopted the NFL model of this next year, and then you go from there after that. And everything is on a year-by-year basis. So if in your brain you're thinking, a lot of turnover, new quarterback, new scheme, let's just get to 6, which I think is reasonable. Hey, get to 6 wins, get a bowl game, keep sustaining that momentum. That's not how it's seen there. This isn't a just get to a bowl game and keep going. This is very much a keep pushing this envelope forward, because in this day of college football, there's no other way to do it, right? It's year by year, envelope forward.
There are no rebuilds. There are no hand it to the redshirt freshman quarterback for next year, right? For the growth so he can be good in 2027. No, it's go get Kaden Hauser. Let's keep this offensive machine rolling. Go get a new offensive line. Go add receivers for Kaden Hauser. And let's try and reload on defense. Let's really invest in getting our 2 best players that we can get back in Xavier Scott and Matthew Bailey. And I don't think Hauck was hired just for those 2. I think it played a role, right? To get a defense that could maximize those guys. So, yeah, there are no rebuild years, and 6 wins is not good enough for Brett Bielema this year. And I think that's a great kind of stance to take, because you don't have to have those rebuild years or those years where you just throw all these young guys into the fire. You don't have to do that anymore. All right, Kaden.
You don't have to, but I don't think it's unfair for us to look at 6 or 7 wins. Like that is probably the window of time, just given how much transition. But they can't look at it like that.
Correct.
Right,
yeah.
And I think that is the difference.
All right, 1 to 10. What is your level of excitement for Kaden Feagin's move to tight end?
5.5. Now I just feel like I've just taken down the middle on both the things that you asked me here, but I think it's layered, right? The running back, Kaden Feagin, is as impressive physically as you are going to see in the Illinois building. He is immensely impressive physically. We've seen some of the best moments for Kaden Feagin have been catching the ball in space, going down the sideline, showing off his speed. Like, those are the moments you think of. You think of USC, you think of Minnesota, you think of those moments. He's also been a tight end. He's moved to tight end. He's been a tight end for 2 months. Mm-hmm. By the time spring ball rolls around, he'll have been a tight end for 4 months. By the season, it's 8 or 9 months. Like, there is an adjustment period for that. So for as much as I think, man, he's impressive physically, man, he is incredibly athletic, man, I know that this guy's been through a lot and he's going to work his butt off, because that's what we've seen from Kaden Feagin. I don't want to sit here and set expectations of, hey, this is the revelation at tight end. If he ends up being that, that's wonderful. I would rather set the expectations a little bit lower than that, because I think that's fair for somebody learning a new position in college football on the fly.
All right, I'm going to up a little bit of the excitement for this to a 7 for me. I'm not 10. This guy's going to be all the answers at tight end for Illinois. But, boy, they need another talent there. They did not add a transfer here after losing Tanner Arkin, who I hope we've talked about enough. His value just playing basically every snap and being as physical and as dominant in the run game as he was. But when he did get thrown the ball, I thought last year was pretty good. Like, when he got thrown the ball, made a couple big catches, but clearly a blocker like Tip Ryman. But you also lost Cole Rusk, who at least was an option when he did play. Was not good enough blocker to play him a lot, but was a good pass catcher when you had to throw him the ball. So you needed another talent there to go along with Christian Abney and Davin Stoffel. But I like that you get Kaden Feagin on the field with one of those other running backs, because they're your best playmakers, right? Like, some of your best playmakers are running backs, but you only had one on the field most of the time last year. So the fact that you can move Kaden to that, even if it's not a true tight end, if it's an H-back role, right? To have him and Khalil Valentine, or him and Aiden Lawfrey on the field together, I like that idea. It's just more guys that the defense actually has to worry about touching the ball and making big plays. Because as you said, Joey, two of his best plays were what, a 40-something yard touchdown swing catch and making people miss and run by defenders at Minnesota in 2023. And then that unbelievable play, 64-yard touchdown catch and run against USC. That's when he's at his best. He just wasn't a natural running back because his vision wasn't great, but even he could have had poor vision if he just decided to go. He was just a little bit tentative at times. And that's what bothered me. When he was not tentative, boy, he was a really productive running back. He's 31st all time in rushing yards. It's not like this was some bust of a running back. It's just, I think, putting him in the best position to succeed for his long term. I like this for Kaden because I don't think he's an NFL running back. He could be an NFL H-back. So can he be like a Jonnu Smith? Can he be like I don't think he's as good of a blocker as like some of these old school fullbacks. Who was the guy for the Redskins back in the day, like the early 2010s? There was a fullback that basically just caught passes all the time. Larry Centers was one from back in the day as well. But I kind of question, can he be an inline blocker? Right. But if you're talking about just be physical, be a blocker, put him in motion a lot, I'm excited about how Barry Lunny can use that type of weapon because they haven't had that type of guy. So you can run him on wheel routes. You can screen past it to Kaden Feagin. Just gives you a dynamic in the offense I don't think you've had in that room. And I do like his potential there more than Jordan Anderson, who in this move is moving back to running back because Caden's a better athlete than Jordan. He's just more explosive, really good in space. So I do like that. I think this puts Kaden in best position to succeed. And I like that you have Jordan Anderson who can move back to running back and be a really effective short yardage rusher. So I like the move more than I don't like the move for sure.
Yeah.
Now, do I think Kaden Feagin is going to have 50 catches for 500 yards this year? No.
Right. And don't send the Mackey Award. Don't plan on trying to get the Mackey Award to Champaign. I think that is what I want to be really careful of because it is an adjustment. And I think that is more than anything the biggest hurdle because physically I think Kaden Feagin can be a willing blocker and a good enough blocker when he gets used to what exactly he has to do as a blocker. And then we obviously know when he gets out in space, he can be a problem. So I'm eager to see what that looks like with him. When you have someone, and that's the thing, man, Kaden Feagin's been a name in Illinois football circles for 6 years, from the recruiting process through, his time in Champaign. Like everything he does is, how's Kaden Feagin do? What's this? And I get it. He is incredibly impressive. He's incredibly talented. When you have this move, I don't want it to come off as like, this is it. This is the one that everyone's been waiting for. Look out, world. Because there is an adjustment, and football takes time. And I think that is the most important thing. But the thing I feel really good about, and you touched on it, I trust Barry Lunny so much to make this.
I get most excited about is like how Barry, like he's got to be sitting there going, oh, this is going to be fun. Like how I can use this guy. Because Caden's going to go from 120 touches to maybe 30. 40 at the most this year, but that's an exciting 30 to 40 touches of how you can deploy that guy along with a good, talented, explosive running back room of Khalil Valentine, Nathan Laughley.
Yeah. Hey, look, maybe my thought by the time it's October will age like we thought Hank Beatty's usage was going to be coming into this season, right? Like it's one of those in the moment, maybe I'm undershooting it. I just think it's fair to him to undershoot it, let him grow naturally into being a tight end rather than thinking, no doubt starter, no doubt, hold on. Let him learn to be a tight end first, and then we'll go from there.
I also really like it for Kaden Hauser, man. When you can have Colin Dixon, Hudson Clement, Alex Perry potentially is your big target. Jay Sean Platt is this speed threat, just take the top off of defense. Braden Trimble, I'm excited to see what he's going to be. Tight end's a big unknown, but the running back room, an offensive line that should be big and physical. We'll see how it all comes together. That's my biggest question is how it all gels. And Jake Renfro is going to be really important to stay healthy, but add Kaden Feagin to that, on the field with a lot of those other guys. It's an exciting group of weapons.
It is. There's a lot to like in what they've rebuilt here offensively with such a significant turnover in terms of skill position players. Well, I guess notably Hank Beatty at this skill position. That's a big, and then Tanner Arkin, but quarterback. So like you understand what they've lost, but I do like the way that they've built to keep that offense rolling. And as you install a new defense, it's exciting and as aggressive and as fast and all of the buzzwords. Still probably going to need that offense to put up some points as things just take time with the defense to gel, to learn, to understand, and all of the things that go into literally an entirely new system.
All right, last thing. Brett Bielema says he's got 5 roster spots available. I've been trying to keep track, so I'm off by like 4 or 5 by doing that, but he basically made clear he can still add to this roster. I think they'd like to add another defensive lineman at the very least here, Joey. But we'll see what else they add. But he did mention like they could look at some Montana players. Kind of haven't really seen a lot of movement there, but they also could continue to look at waiver players. So there is still a possibility of adding to this roster.
There's waiver players has been that is me. I mean, I've sent you this text 100 times. That's been the drum that I've been mentally beating for a while here because that makes sense when you start looking at some of the posts of hey, I'm still waiting on a waiver. This is you kind of just scroll through Twitter and the transfer portal and all of those things. I think you can still find some talent in the waiver market here, and we'll see if they go in and take a bunch of Montana guys. I don't know. I truly do not know that answer. There hasn't been a wave that we've seen of Montana players portaling to this point in time, so we'll see how all of that shakes out. But a defensive line continues to make sense, even with the new scheme that you broke it down earlier. You can at least make a little bit more sense of the numbers now and the scheme they're going to run. I still think getting another piece, another body, some more experience in there would be good. Are you at all intrigued about a tight end? Or because here's the way I look at tight end, you've got Abney and Stoffel, who I think are your ready to play guys right now. We just talked about Feagin. Where does he fit into that category? I don't know at this exact moment in time. I mean, I like the tools, but again, new to the position. And then it's a lot of young guys, a lot of guys that still need your Tanner Hollingers, Grant Smith, Logan Farrell, Will Vala, talented guys, but they're still tight end takes in terms of skill positions the longest. So do you try to find another ready to play older guy in the Carson Goda mold where someone transfers up? I don't know. I just that's something I've kind of been thinking about over the last 24 hours.
The other guy I just want to mention, Montana's best players are running back. Eli Gilman was their best player. He's run for like 4,000 yards there. I still haven't thought running back because they have like depth there, and even moving Kaden Feagin, you're just moving Jordan Anderson to his role basically. And I still think Khalil Valentine is going to get a ton of carries. I think Aiden Lawford just needs to stay healthy. And then they have these young guys that they really are high on. But if you can add like the Big Sky's best running back, like maybe you do that. So it just, I want to mention it, but it makes most sense for me, D-line or some kind of linebacker, right? Like some kind of outside linebacker that can kind of fit into this scheme.
Yeah, that's 5 roster spots is a lot, and it's more than I thought. It's probably 2 or 3 more than I thought were in the mix here. So we'll see. To be clear,
what they do not need, even though they probably will add one, is offensive. They have 20 offensive linemen on this roster. I think he talked to last week about adding another lineman on offense. I'm like, how many you need? That's 4 groups. You have 4 deep on the offensive line.
Hey, always be ready. Man, I lost completely my train of thought from where I was. No, you're fine.
It's amazing. There at one point, I think in the Lovie Smith or Tim Beckman era, there was like 12 offensive linemen scholarship, and now there's 20. It's just amazing to me.
Yeah, there's a ton of offensive linemen. We'll see. I mean, the point I wanted to make was they can still add the roster spots. They can still add. We're talking June additions, and I think that is the very, very big point here. Is these aren't spring ball additions. There was kind of that deadline of getting enrolled in classes in the right time. That has come and gone. So any potential additions would be or June additions to show up in time for summer workouts, training camp, and then the season. So it's a shorter runway there, which maybe, again, you would look for more experience in that window.
Yeah, the guys who don't need to learn an entire new scheme. So it makes sense if a Montana guy or two came along. But all right, That'll do it for us. We covered a lot here on this podcast. We appreciate everybody listening. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell. If you're listening on the podcast, follow us, rate us, review us wherever you get your podcast. But for Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.
Bye, everybody.